Who is the best Route 1 Pokemon in the entire series? Most Pokemon available on the first route of the game are not supposed to be great competitively, and even their fully evolved forms tend to be underwhelming, with low stats and little in the way of unique advantages. Powerful Pokemon probably shouldn't be available to you right out of the gate, but some Route 1 Pokemon beat these allegations and are surprisingly solid competitively, offering unique niche roles. Some are even straight up excellent and are metagame staples. Let's rank every single Route 1 Pokemon in the entire series from worst to best. The criteria for this will be Pokemon obtainable in the first route of the game that debuted as first route Pokemon. Pokemon from previous generations who were added as first route Pokemon later in the series will not count. For example, Munchlax can be found on the first route of Pokemon Sun and Moon, but I wouldn't consider Snorlax a Route 1 Pokemon. They can also only be obtainable at the very start of the game in the grass. Pokemon obtainable by headbutting trees or surfing don't count either. I will be judging these Pokemon based on their fully evolved forms, and we will be judging them based on competitive singles. Let's get into it, folks. But first, if I reach 80,000 subscribers, I will organize a collaborative video with world famous Route 1 Pokemon, Furret. Subscribe to the channel to make this a reality. Thank you. At the very bottom of the list, the worst Route 1 Pokemon in the game, I have put Beautifly. This Pokemon offers nothing. It has terrible stats, an unremarkable bug flying typing, and the ability Swarm grants bonus bug type damage at 1/3 or less of your health, which is pretty bad on a Pokemon that is so frail and gets so little out of this damage boost with such terrible offensive stats. Beautifly is completely outclassed by Butterfree, who is better in every single way, and that is rough. If you're outclassed by Butterfree, something is very wrong. Even in Gen 3 ZU, the debut generation for Beautifly, it is not viable in ZU, the lowest power level format, and that is a true disaster. I do apologize to Beautifly fans, but I think this is the worst Route 1 Pokemon that you can possibly get. Right after Beautifly, we have Dustox, a similarly horrendous Pokemon that also evolves from Wurmple. This Pokemon has terrible stats, a horrendous bug poison type combination, and also little to offer, but it had slightly more to offer than Beautifly. Dustox at least has the ability Shield Dust, which grants an immunity to secondary effects from attacks, which is pretty useful. And unlike Beautifly, Dustox does at least have a role in Gen 3 ZU. This Pokemon can operate decently as a special wall thanks to its base 90 special defense, which would be terrible anywhere else, but in Gen 3 ZU it's actually above average. Dustox also has access to Moonlight for healing, an immunity to poison because of its bug poison typing, and utility options like Whirlwind to phase enemies. And on a Pokemon like this, Shield Dust does have some application, preventing you from being frozen or hit with secondary effects that apply status and things like this. Obviously terrible, but at least usable in the very low power level world of Gen 3 ZU. Imagine that. Up next I have Oinkologne, the evolved form of Lechonk from the first area of Gen 9. This Pokemon doesn't look that bad for a Route 1 fellow. It's got 110 base HP, that's actually okay, and base 100 attack as well, but it doesn't get anything. It doesn't get recovery, doesn't get any good attacks. It does have the useful ability Thick Fat, but you can't really leverage this for any meaningful advantage. The best Oinkologne can do is probably Curse Rest. Maybe a Curse Rest Sleep Talk Oinkologne could be something with the bulk provided by Thick Fat, but I don't know. This doesn't appear to be very good, in my opinion. Up next is Greedent. Greedent is a squirrel creature, and this is a Pokemon known for being completely immune to the intoxicating allure of human greed. On top of this, Greedent has a great HP stat of base 120 and a decent attack and defense. Greedent has Cheek Pouch, which will heal it a bit after it eats a berry, so you can do something with this. You can do Belly Drum Citrus Berry, get bonus healing from the Cheek Pouch, and have a powerful attacker. You've got access to Earthquake and Crunch, that's good coverage. The problem though is that you have a non-existent speed stat of base 20, so you probably need Trick Room support to make this work, and Trick Room is famously quite terrible in singles, so that is going to be a huge issue, but this is something. It's more than can be said for the Pokemon below in my opinion. Is it very good? I would say no, but hey, we can offer Greedent a bit of respect. Up next, Dubwool from Gen 8. Dubwool is a big sheep, it's a normal type, it's got some average stats, but it has the ability Fluffy. Fluffy means you take half damage from contact moves, but double damage from fire type moves. Fluffy gives you some bulk. On top of this, you also have the combination of Cotton Guard, which raises your defense by 3 stages. It's a great move. And Body Press, which deals damage based on your defense stat. That's a natural synergy. So you can run a set with Cotton Guard and Body Press plus Rest and Sleep Talk, and defeat things with your big defense stat and the ability Fluffy, granting you bonus bulk. The issue though is that this is very one-dimensional. A simple ghost type will ruin your entire day, as they are completely immune to your only attack. So it's very easy to counter this, but this I think is better than everything below. The Greedent needs a lot of setup. You got a Trick Room. Maybe there's a world where you could build around a double win condition in ZU by eliminating their ghost type to create the double sweep. It's possible. That's a possible game plan. I don't think it's a good idea, but I think it has more going for it than previous entries. Up next is a famous Pokemon. One of the most famous Pokemon in history, Furret. This is a Pokemon world renowned for his excellence as a showman. He just puts on a show every time he's on the field, and the crowd loves him. However, he has nothing to offer whatsoever. He has the ability to run away with no competitive use. You can run away from in-game battles if you want, but that has no competitive bearing. Keen Eye also offers little. An immunity to accuracy lowering. I mean, that's so specific, you never see it. That's nothing. So why have I put Furret above Dubwool and Greedent, who seemingly do have options? It's literally because Furret learns the move Trick. Tricking a Choice Band is going to be higher value than putting a Greedent on your team. You can disrupt one thing and progress your game plan. There you go. I think that Furret having Trick is more useful than anything below, because it might actually have a gameplay impact and not be ridiculously hard to build around. Perhaps that's controversial though. I could have a Furret bias here. That's something I'm going to acknowledge, a Furret bias, but I'd sincerely believe that Furret is superior to Dubwool and Greedent, and he's superior in the eyes of the people, which is what I think is more important as well. Up next we have Watchog, and this is a Pokemon that I dislike. I think that it's hideous. I think that it's extremely forgettable, but I do put it above Furret, I'm going to be honest, purely because it has the ability Analytic, which grants bonus damage if you move second. Just access to that makes you a bit better than Furret. You also have the move Thunder Wave and the move Hypnosis. Those can do things. Those can have an impact. So there you go, Watchog. You've got some stuff. I hate to admit it. Apart from that though, this is obviously a terrible Pokemon with terrible stats and normal typing and little to offer. Pidgeot is up next. Pidgeot from Generation 1. One of the most recognizable Pokemon of all time. Pidgey is one that you encounter very early on in Generation 1, which has made it a little bit iconic. It's on many in-game teams, but regrettably I think that this is an incredibly average Pokemon with just about nothing going for it. It is a simple normal flying type with average stats across the board and seemingly no good abilities. Keen Eye is nothing, as we've established. Tangled Feet offers evasion if you're confused. That is terrible. Big Pecs makes you immune to having your defense lowered. I mean, that is just useless. Pidgeot can be okay in low tiers just off the back of Stamp Return, Brave Bird, and access to U-Turn, which is a good move. Quick Attack is also some sort of priority option, which gives it some utility. Tangled Feet is the ability of choice because it has a chance to achieve something, I suppose, but yeah, Pidgeot not the best. And we of course aren't counting Mega Pidgeot, just base form Pidgeot. Up next, Noctowl. Noctowl is also a normal flying type Pokemon, but it has slightly more to offer with the ability Insomnia, which grants sleep immunity. That's something. Noctowl also gets access to Hypnosis to inflict sleep and have some sort of impact. And as well, Noctowl gets the ability Tinted Lens as an alternative, which is a good offensive ability, allowing you to deal double damage on not very effective targets, basically cancelling out resistance, and this can make its stamp moves more spammable. This is still quite bad. Noctowl is ranked ZU in most generations, however, it has a bit of unique flair going for it. A little bit. Up next I have put Kricketune, which you might be surprised by. Jimothy, what is Kricketune doing above Pokemon that actually have options? Literally the only reason I have put Kricketune on here is because it can learn Sticky Web. And that's enough. You can lead with a Kricketune who has Focus Sash, makes Sticky Web, and that can be enough to be worth the Pokemon slot. There are of course better Sticky Web setters. Kricketune might actually be the worst one, but setting Sticky Web on the field has a way higher impact than anything below it. So I've given Kricketune this position. And this is also exactly why Spidops is right above Kricketune. Spidops also has access to Sticky Web and the ability Insomnia, granting it sleep immunity. Sleep is actually banned in Gen 9 competitive singles now though, so Insomnia is a useless ability, but we can give Spidops some respect for having that niche of being a sleep immune Sticky Web setter in the pre-sleep ban metagame of Gen 9. There you go. Congratulations to Spidops, you have done it. Up next is Orbeetle, who actually has pretty damn good stats for a Route 1 bug Pokemon. The issue though is that this is a bug psychic type, one of the worst type combinations possible. These are the two worst defensive typings in the game, combined together to create a true travesty. But you can use Orbeetle with an agility weakness policy set and stored power in Gen 8 ZU apparently. So there you go, that's something. Up next, Gumshoes, a hideous Pokemon as well. Gumshoes, a debuted in Generation 7 where it was ranked in ZU, and this Pokemon is horrible. It is a regular old normal type with little to offer. It has a decent attack stat of base 110, and some okay offensive abilities too. Stakeout is nice, dealing double damage against defensive switches, adaptability increases your stab damage, but ultimately this thing is way too slow with only base 45 speed and extremely frail. Because of that, it can't really accomplish much, even in Gen 7 ZU. Up next is Alolan Raticate, an alternate form of Raticate from Gen 7, and this is an absolutely horrendous Pokemon. Dark Normal is a horrible type combination. You have worse abilities than the base form Raticate. Gluttony is not very useful. How are you supposed to eat berries with this? It is too frail. Thick Fat, also kind of useless on something so frail, there's no point. The best you're going to do with this is Hustle, granting you damage at the cost of accuracy. I don't consider that to be a very good trade. In Gen 7 PU, you can use Swords Dance and a Z move to bypass the accuracy debuff, because Z moves are perfectly accurate. That's the best you can really do with this, and that's more than could be said of Gumshoes, but still not an impressive Pokemon at all. No. Up next is Thievul from Generation 8. This Pokemon looks cool, but looks can be deceiving, as they say. This Pokemon has little to offer, with average stats, but it does have the ability Stakeout, and an okay base speed of 90 for the lower tiers, meaning it can operate as a wall breaker in Gen 8 PU. It also has access to Parting Shot and Knockoff, which are good moves. Thievul has a tiny bit more to offer than the Pokemon before it, I think. Up next, Mightyena. Mightyena is actually pretty good in early gen low tiers. Despite its terrible stats, it has that Mono Dark typing and the ability Intimidate, which is a great defensive ability, simply lowering the enemy's attack by 1. Mightyena was pretty good in Gen 4 UU. It had a role as a stall breaker with Taunt, Super Fang, and some new options with the physical special split enabling Crunch and Sucker Punch as attacks. Obviously quite terrible in most other generations, but a viable role in UU is pretty impressive compared to some of these other Route 1 fellows. So we gotta give Mightyena some respect for that. Up next, Bibarel, a Pokemon famous for being able to learn all the good HMs, making it a common fixture of Gen 4 in-game playthroughs. In competitive though, can it do much? Well, Bibarel has a normal water type combination, which I think is an improvement over a simple mono normal, and it has the ability Simple. Simple will double your stat stage changes, and you can abuse this with Swords Dance to gain +4 attack instead of +2 attack like you usually would. Even though Bibarel's stats are unimpressive with only 85 base attack, the ability to ramp up your attack so quickly with that simple boost turns you into quite a threat. And you have access to quick attack for a normal stab priority move, making up for your low speed and allowing you to pose a threat with that after the simple boost. And also Aqua Jet for a water type option. Bibarel was also ranked UU in Gen 4. It's not considered very good in the tier, but it is at least okay, and that's good enough for me. Up next is Ordino, a mono-normal type from Gen 5. And unlike a lot of these other ones, it actually has some good tools. It's got a decent HP stat, good utility like access to Wish, Heal Bell, and status options. And most importantly of all, Ordino has access to Regenerator, one of the best abilities in the entire game, healing you for 1/3 of your health every time you switch. This is the safest way to heal in Pokemon, and it's fantastic in competitive singles. Ordino tends to be ranked in lower tiers though, just because its stats are poor, and there are better Regenerator Pokemon that outclass it usually, but compared to many of these other Route 1 Pokemon, this is pretty solid. Up next is Toucannon, yet another normal flying type Pokemon, but this one has pretty good offensive tools. It's got base 120 attack, which is quite great, actually, and the ability Skill Link, a great offensive ability, which causes multi-hit attacks to always hit the maximum number of times. An alternative option is Sheer Force, which is also excellent, granting 1.3 times damage to moves with secondary effects, while nullifying the secondary effect itself. Toucannon can operate as a pretty good wall breaker in Gen 7 PU, with its access to Bullet Seed and Skill Link like Boom Burst and Overheat. It's of course not great, its main drawback being that pretty low speed of base 60 and frailty across the board, but it stands out a bit more than some of the other normal flying types in the game. Up next, Vikavolt. Vikavolt is a Pokemon that looks pretty cool. It's a bug electric type. It has the ability Levitate, which is actually great, offering ground immunity. And it has a monstrous special attack stat of 145. These are pretty impressive stats for a Route 1 Pokemon. But Vikavolt's greatest downfall is its unfortunate speed stat of only base 43. And its pretty terrible defensive typing and general defensive frailty, with only 77 HP and unimpressive stats elsewhere. But Vikavolt is definitely a cut above many of these other Route 1 bugs, with a viable role in Gen 7 RU as a bulky pivot, thanks to its access to Roost and impressive offensive damage damage output too. Up next is Gruffii from Generation 9, who evolves from Shroodle. This Pokemon has a normal poison typing and the always excellent ability Prankster. Prankster grants +1 priority to non-attacking moves, and you have some pretty good options to take advantage of that, including Encore, Parting Shot, Copycat, Switcheroo, etc. I have seen Gruffii occasionally in tiers like Gen 9 UU, despite its lower ranking of ZU because of that unique utility it offers, but it obviously has many drawbacks, with that terrible normal poison typing being chief among them, and of course its frailty on the stats side. Up next is regular old Raticate. Raticate does actually have a viable role in Gen 1 OU. Amazingly. It's not great, but it's somewhat usable. It is kind of like a bad second Tauros, having similar tools such as the normal type immunity to Body Slam Paralysis, Stab on Body Slam, and Hyper Beam, which is always nice. You have access to Bubble Beam, which is a way to hit Rhydon at least, and you do set yourself apart with Super Fang, an option no other normal type attacker can get. Super Fang will deal 50% of your opponent's remaining HP in damage, a great way to bring them down into range of Hyper Beam. In later generations, Raticate also gains access to Guts, which is a great ability, enhancing your attack by 1.5 times if you are status. You can self-inflict status with items like the Flame Orb and Toxic Orb. This made Raticate a viable attacker in UU, and a pretty good choice in lower tiers for a few generations there. Actually pretty fast and threatening with Guts and Stab Facade. The first ever average normal type from Route 1 has a lot of its competition beat, with genuine, unique tools that others do not have. We love to see it. Up next, Jumpluff, the evolved form of Hoppip. Jumpluff has a viable niche role in Gen 3 OU as a fast disruptor and stall breaker. Jumpluff has access to Sleep Powder and is one of the fastest sleep-setting Pokemon available in the game. Beyond this, it has more useful utility options like Encore to trap the enemy into repeating disadvantageous moves, and Leech Seed, an effect that deals damage to the enemy while healing you. Jumpluff has been used by top Gen 3 OU players such as H-Clat and the Linear Curve to reasonable success. Jumpluff would not go on to have much success in later games, unfortunately, despite receiving new tools like the ability Infiltrator, but its success in Gen 3 OU is respectable. Up next is Linoone, the evolved form of Zigzagoon, who in its debut game has the impressive rank of UUBL. Imagine this. Linoone may seem just as average as all of its other Route 1 normal type counterparts, with the unimpressive ability Pickup, which has no competitive use, and a measly base attack of 70, but what makes Linoone usable is its combination of the move Belly Drum, a powerful boosting move that maximizes your attack at the cost of half of your health, and Extreme Speed, one of the most powerful priority moves in the series. This 80 power priority move is one of the best attacking options back in Gen 3, and it synergizes perfectly with Belly Drum, and this combination can be deadly, ending games on the spot sometimes. Linoone requires setup if used in OU though, often in the form of effects like Light Screen, Reflect, and Memento, to try and give Linoone those free turns to set up Belly Drum and go for the sweep. This can be surprisingly effective. It is a bit of a gimmick, it is quite niche, but it can also catch you off guard and cheese some victories. And Linoone tends to be ranked around RU in later generations as a result of this combo. Up next, I am going to give some respect to Duckspun from Generation 9. This Pokemon actually has some pretty nice defensive qualities, with a mono fairy typing and a solid defense stat of base 115. It also has the ability Well-Baked Body, which grants fire immunity and +2 defense if hit by a fire type move. Although this Pokemon is ranked in ZU, it has a viable role in Ubis as a counter to Koraidon. You are immune to dragon type damage, resist fighting type damage, and you're also immune to that sun boosted fire type damage, making you perfect against Koraidon. And I think for that alone, Duckspun deserves some respect. Up next is Stoutland, who evolves from Lillipup. Stoutland has some okay stats. Base 100 attack, a decent enough base 90 defense and special defense, and an okay base 80 speed. But what really made Stoutland excellent in its debut game of Gen 5 was the ability Sand Rush. Sand Rush simply grants double speed in the sand. And abilities like this that grant double speed in a certain weather effect are unbelievably powerful, turning otherwise unremarkable looking Pokemon into game-ending threats. Excadrill was once a menace, abusing Sand Rush in Gen 5 OU alongside the permanent Sandstorm of Tyranitar or Hippowdon. Excadrill was banned as a result, and the next best Sand Rush user for a time was Stoutland. A choice-banned Stoutland was incredibly powerful on sand teams, and a fantastic wall breaker and game ender. Return for big stab damage was the go-to option, but Superpower is pretty nice coverage on Stoutland as well. Its physical options are pretty unimpressive, with Fire Fang being its next best attacking tool, and Pursuit coming in handy occasionally. But really Sand Rush is what made this such a force to be reckoned with. Eventually, all of these abilities that grant double speed in weather were banned in Generation 5, and part of the reason for that was because of Stoutland. Up next we have Vivillon. This Pokemon looks like yet another average bug flying type Pokemon, which there are many of, but this Pokemon sets itself apart in a big way. Vivillon has access to Quiver Dance, one of the best boosting moves in the entire game. Vivillon has the ability Compound Eyes, granting it 1.3 times accuracy, and access to Sleep Powder, which, when boosted by Compound Eyes, pretty much has 100 accuracy. It is just shy. And because of this, Vivillon has a viable role in Anything Goes in Gen 7. Anything Goes is the format above Ubers, where everything is allowed, there is no restrictions. And that includes no Sleep Clause. With the speed boost from Quiver Dance and an accurate sleep move in the form of Sleep Powder, Vivillon can potentially solo entire teams by simply inflicting sleep repeatedly, boosting itself up further, and sweeping with Hurricane. Hurricane also crucially has its accuracy boosted by Compound Eyes. A Route 1 bug having a viable role in Anything Goes is quite impressive, I have to say. Up next is Scrafty. Scrafty is a dark fighting type Pokemon from Generation 5 that is actually quite solid for a Route 1 Pokemon. It has impressive defensive stats, 3 great choices for abilities, and access to Dragon Dance to make up for its low speed and leverage its good defenses for some sort of advantage. Scrafty is ranked UU in its debut game and tends to be a pretty good choice in lower tiers across the board. Up next is Staraptor. Staraptor is another normal flying type, but this is perhaps the king of them all. Staraptor's 120 base attack is impressive, and base 100 speed is also serviceable. Staraptor has a great physical move pool, including access to Brave Bird for stab, Close Combat for great coverage, and U-Turn to pivot. Quick Attack is another good option for stab priority. Staraptor also has some solid abilities. Intimidate, which I'm sure you're familiar with at this point, and Reckless. Reckless grants 1.2 times damage to moves with recoil or crash effects. This includes Double Edge and Brave Bird, which both have recoil effects and can lead to some seriously impressive damage output from Staraptor. Staraptor is a Pokemon known for being ranked in a UUBL for multiple generations in a row, and from Generation 4 to 7 it maintained this position. Up next is Diggersby. Diggersby is a normal ground type Pokemon with the ever valuable ability Huge Power. Huge Power will double a Pokemon's attack stat, and even though Diggersby has a very low base attack of only 56, with bonus stats from EVs and a plus attack nature that then get doubled, Diggersby can achieve absurd damage output. Diggersby is ranked UUBL in its debut game of Gen 6 and is a reasonably viable choice in OU as a wall breaker with some genuine merit over other Huge Power or Pure Power Pokemon in the format like Mega Medicham and Azumarill. Diggersby's unique typing offers different immunities and defensive traits. Diggersby has access to the Swords Dance and Quick Attack combo, which is pretty nice. Stab Earthquake comes in handy, as does Stab Return for powerful neutral damage. Up next is Talonflame. This is the first Route 1 Pokemon here that was straight up ranked in OU in its debut game. Talonflame is a fire flying type Pokemon, a pretty bad typing in a world where Stealth Rock exists, but it makes up for this poor typing with the ability Gale Wings. Gale Wings grants priority to all flying type moves. This is an amazing ability, which granted Talonflame with incredibly powerful priority moves like Brave Bird and itemless acrobatics. Roost also offered a healing option that was boosted by Gale Wings. In later generations, Gale Wings was nerfed, only offering flying type moves priority if the Pokemon is at full health. This was a significant nerf to Talonflame, but surprisingly, the Pokemon still saw some use competitively thanks to its other ability, Flame Body. Flame Body has a 30% chance to inflict burn on Pokemon that make contact. In Generation 9, Talonflame is actually a pretty good defensive Pokemon thanks to this ability, and the item Heavy Duty Boots, which grants hazard immunity, patching up that Stealth Rock weakness. Defog is a much more scarce option in Gen 9, and Talonflame is one of the few Pokemon that actually kept this option, giving it some real value. Will-O-Wisp is also a great tool to have in a format where status-inflicting moves like this also became more scarce. Among Route 1 Pokemon, Talonflame is actually very impressive. Up next is Clodsire. Haldean Wooper can be obtained in the first area of Scarlet and Violet, and it evolves into Clodsire, who is an excellent competitive Pokemon all around. Clodsire has great defensive stats with base 130 HP and a solid base 100 special defense. And Clodsire has two great choices for abilities. Water Absorb, which grants water immunity and healing if struck by a water move, and the more popular Unaware. Unaware will ignore the enemy's stat stage changes, making you very effective against boost sweepers, ignoring all of their offensive boosts. Clodsire has a fantastic defensive and utility move pool with access to the immediate healing of Recover, Toxic, which is much more scarce now, Spikes and Stealth Rock, valuable entry hazards, and Earthquake for a solid attack as well. Ever since the start of Gen 9, Clodsire has helped keep the format together as a reliable answer to sometimes extremely broken offensive threats. Clodsire is even commonly seen up in Ubers, where it is a pretty good answer to powerful special threats like Miraidon. I think Clodsire is an excellent Pokemon design all around, a very healthy presence that has offered consistency in a tumultuous and often chaotic generation. And the best Route 1 Pokemon in the entire series would have to be Corviknight. Raticate can be obtained in the first route of the game in Generation 8, and it evolves into one of the best competitive Pokemon in recent memory. Corviknight has the excellent Steel-Flying type combination, which it shares with Skarmory, and honestly this defensive typing is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Flying complements Steel incredibly well, removing their weakness to ground and replacing it with an immunity, and also patching up their weakness to fighting. Corviknight has solid enough defensive stats to take advantage of this excellent typing, and a very good move pool too. Roost works well as a simple healing option. Defog is fantastic utility, and Corviknight is the premier defog user in both Gen 8 and Gen 9 OU. And U-turn is what makes Corviknight especially excellent, allowing it to keep up momentum. A powerful defensive Pokemon like this is perfect to give a pivoting move to. It can take incoming hits with ease, safely granting an entry point to powerful wall breakers that might be too frail to hit the field on their own safely. Corviknight can also take advantage of Body Press, leveraging its good defense stat for a solid attack, and Brave Bird, which can hit key targets super effectively. With a Rocky Helmet equipped, Corviknight can also leverage its great defensive traits to make progress against the enemy, racking up little bits of chip damage and dissuading them from throwing out moves like Rapid Spin or U-turn, at risk of losing their valuable health. Corviknight also has the ability Pressure, which has great defensive application, causing the opponent to spend twice as much PP on all of their moves. Corviknight was consistently seen in Gen 8 OU, and it has been a staple of Gen 9 OU as well. And even in Gen 9 Ubers, Corviknight is occasionally seen as a solid check to threats like Arceus, Ground. And there's my ranking of all of the Route 1 Pokemon in the franchise. Most of these are quite forgettable and generally unimpressive competitively, but some of them have impressed competitive players over the years, with unique advantages not offered by anything else. And in some situations, like with Corviknight and Clodsire, they are just straight up excellent Pokemon, commonly seen at high level play. Who is your favorite Route 1 Pokemon in the game? Mine would have to be Furret. Thank you for watching.